Hi everyone, so in this video we're gonna learn about the on-click listener interface in Android and Java. So first let's go ahead and open the project pane and then open the app folder, Java, and then the first package that contains the main activity file. So if you go to the activity underline main.xml, make sure that you set an ID for the true button and the wrong button that we have here. So the ID that I set for these buttons is btn true and btn wrong. So if I go to the main activity class here, I can create a reference to those buttons. So for example, I can say button, and the name of the first one is going to be btn true. So here I'm using the name of my variable of type button to be the same as the ID of this component that I set here inside my XML file. Okay, you can change the name of your variable if you want. So here after the assignment operator, I'm gonna assign a value to this variable of type button. So I'm gonna put the reference of that component. So find view by ID r.id dot btn true semicolon. So now this btn true is referencing to this button true button. So this means that I can just write codes here. I can set an on-click listener to this button. So when that btn true is tapped, it's gonna just report back here and we can understand what's going on and we can do something when the button is tapped. Okay, so there are multiple ways to set an on-click listener to a view. But first, let me show you the documentation. Here it is, the documentation of the view.onClick listener. And if you look at the description, it says interface definition for a callback to be invoked when a view is clicked. So the callback is important here. What does this mean? This means that when the button is tapped, if the button has an on-click listener, then it's gonna invoke the on-click method. It's gonna report back and it's gonna invoke or it's gonna execute the on-click method. So here, let's take a look at some of these methods. Here we've got the summary, the on-click method called when a view has been clicked. And we've got the public methods. So here it says called when a view has been clicked, the view that was clicked. So what does the view mean here? The view is actually the button itself. And if you look at the documentation of the button, you will see that the button is a subclass of view. So here it is, the class hierarchy of the button. First we have the object, then we have the view, the text view, and then the button. So this hierarchy means that the button is a text view, and the text view is a view, and the view is an object. So in other words, the button is indirectly a view, or the button is an object. And let me tell you something here. All of these components, all of these UI components that you can see here are a subclass of view. So this means that we can set an on-click listener to all of these components. For example, if you want to set an on-click listener to this text view, you can. Or if you want to set an on-click listener to the image view, you can. So this is very important that you understand about this hierarchy here. So let's go back to the on-click listener. So the on-click listener is going to specify when a view is tapped and it's going to report back. And that's called callback. So here, I'm going to set an on-click listener for this btn true separately. I'm going to create an on-click listener and I'm going to name it as my on-click listener. So let's say on-click listener, and then I'm gonna give it a name. So this is the type, okay? I'm creating a variable here, and I'm gonna name it as my click listener assignment operator. So in order to create a listener, I need to put the keyword new and then just type in here V. So make sure to hold down the shift key and then press on the letter V on your keyboard. So here the autocomplete feature of Android Studio is gonna do the rest of the things for you. So just select a view.onClick listener and it has a pair of curly braces with 3 dots inside of it. this is the option that we should choose, and then press on enter key on your keyboard. So now here we have this onClick listener, but make sure to put the semicolon after the ending curly brace here. So now there is no compile error. So here it is, my onClick listener, and we have the onClick method. This is the onClick listener that is going to have a callback. So what do I mean by the callback? This means that if a view is tapped, it's gonna report back by executing this onClick method that we have here. So whatever we put inside the onClick method will be executed when the button is tapped. So for example, here I'm gonna say log.I, and then I'm gonna set the tag to be listener, comma, and I'm gonna set the value to be my button is tapped, okay? And then I'm gonna put a semicolon at the end of the statement. So now I need to set this listener to this btn true, otherwise it won't work because this btn true doesn't have a listener yet. So I am still inside the curly braces of this onClick method. I'm gonna say btn true dot set onClick listener, and I'm gonna refer to this my click listener. That's it. Now that we set an onClick listener to this btn true, if this btn true is tapped, it's gonna execute this onClick method. It's gonna just report back that a button is tapped, and it's gonna execute this onClick method. So this is called the callback. So by the way, in the newest version of Android Studio, there is a separate section here in order to select the emulator. So if you click on this little triangle here, just beside this play button, here you can select the emulator. So for example, I'm gonna choose this Pixel XL API 29, and I'm gonna run the program now. So now let's go ahead and tap on the true button. And if you go back to Android Studio, just click on this logcat here, and then inside the search bar, search for the tag. So the tag that I specified in my code is listener. I'm just gonna copy this value and put it here inside the search bar. And make sure that the filter says verbose, okay? So you can have all the values. Now here it is, the listener, and it says my button is tapped. So if I click on this true button again it's gonna output these values to the console. So let's also set an onClick listener for the btn run. But first, we must have a reference to that button. So I'm gonna say button, and I'm gonna name it as btn run. And let's put an assignment operator, find view by id, r.id.btn run, semicolon. And now it's time to set an onClick listener for this btn run. So let's say btn run dot set onClick listener, and then let's just refer to this my click listener. So now if I run the program, you will see that if I tap on this run button, it's gonna also output some values to the console. It says my button is tapped. So we have the true button and we have the run button. Okay, so now there is a question here. How we can differentiate between the clicking of the btn true and the btn run? For example, when the user taps on the btn true, I want the logcat say that, for example, the btn true is tapped. And when the user taps on the btn run, I want the logcat say that the btn run is tapped. How we can do that? So this is a mini challenge for you. Just go ahead, pause the video. If you want to, you can just search online in order to find the solution to this problem. And when you do your best, it doesn't matter whether you solve this challenge or not, you can continue watching this tutorial and see how I am going to solve this problem. So give this challenge your best shot and let's go. So hopefully you did your best, and in this course, full effort always equals full victory. So let's go inside this onClick method, and I'm gonna just delete this log statement. And I'm gonna create an if statement. I'm gonna say if. So here we have a reference to the view that is tapped inside the parenthesis of this onClick method. This is actually the argument. You'll learn more about this later. So now inside the parenthesis of this if, I can say if the view that is tapped, and I'm gonna refer to its ID. So I'm gonna say get ID is equal to the r.id.btn true, then I can go ahead and open and close the curly braces. Inside the curly braces of this if statement, I can just enter my logic here. I can say log.i, and then the tag is going to be, for example, my app, comma, and the value is going to be btn true is tapped now. Okay? And here, let's create the other logic for when the btn wrong is tapped. So after the ending curly brace of this if statement, I'm gonna say else if. Inside the parentheses, I'm gonna say view dot get ID. So the view refers to the view that is tapped, and the ID is equal to r.id.btn wrong. Then now we are sure that the btn wrong is tapped. So I'm just gonna copy this log statement and paste it here, and I'm gonna say btn wrong is tapped now. So here, let's put a semicolon at the end of our log statements. I forgot to do that. Now let's go ahead and run the program and see the results. So let's go ahead and click on this true button, and then just go to the logcat. Here, I have changed the tag, so that's why I cannot see any value here. So the tag now is my app. I'm just gonna enter that tag here inside the search bar, and here it says btn true is tapped now. So let's go ahead and tap on the wrong button, and it says btn wrong is tapped now. Perfect. And finally, let's learn about the other type of click listener that is called the anonymous click listener. So if you go back to the main activity class, here I'm just gonna comment out this line of code that sets an onClick listener for the btn wrong. Here I'm gonna set the onClick listener anonymously. So what do I mean by that? Here, notice that we have this myClick listener and it is known. This means that we can refer to it. It has a name, myClick listener. So later in the code, we can just refer to this myClick listener and use it. But how about an anonymous onClick listener? So for example, I can say btn wrong dot set onClick listener. Now I am going to create the onClick listener on the spot. How? I'm just gonna say new, and then hold down the shift key and then press on the letter V. And now we have this option, view.onClick listener, and I'm gonna press an enter key on my keyboard. So now it has created the onClick listener anonymously for me. In other words, this onClick listener has no name, it is just created on the spot. So this is how we code in Java. And the reason that we might use the anonymous onClick listener is that we don't need this onClick listener anywhere else in the code. We just need it on the spot, and the only place that we need this onClick listener is here. So if you don't need your onClick listener to be called from other places in your code, you can just create it on the spot, and here whatever I put inside the onClick method will be executed when the btn wrong is tapped. So here, I'm just gonna delete this else if part of this if statement. So make sure to also select the opening and the closing curly brace of this else if statement. But first, make sure to just cut this line of code, the log statement, and then paste it here inside the onClick method, and then delete this else if part. You don't need it anymore. Now, if I run the program, you will see that if I tap on the wrong button here, you can see that it's gonna output this value to the console. btn wrong is tapped now. In the next video, we're gonna learn about post messages in Android. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.